When I pressed play on that laptop in the courtroom and everyone saw the footage, my ex-wife stumbling around our kitchen at 2 in the morning, lines of powder on the counter, our kid's bedroom door 20 feet away, her lawyer actually stood up and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess." But it was too late. 6 months of her lies about being Mother of the Year crumbled in 90 seconds of video evidence. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. Real stories, real justice, no sugarcoating. You know what? I notice many of you watching haven't hit that subscribe button yet. Here's the thing, we drop stories like this every single day. Stories about people who got played, got smart, and got even. If you want to see how these situations really end, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Ethan. I'm 42 years old, a mechanical engineer at an aerospace firm, and for 13 years I thought I had the life I'd always wanted. I met Vanessa when we were both 27 at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy. She was a marketing coordinator, beautiful, energetic, always the center of attention at parties. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, got married at a vineyard in Napa, and bought a 4-bedroom house in a good school district 30 minutes outside the city. Our daughter Lily came first, then our son Owen 3 years later. I worked long hours, but I made every school play, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. Vanessa had reduced her hours to part-time after Lily was born, said she wanted to be there for the kids. I supported that completely. My salary was enough to cover everything: the mortgage, the cars, the activities, family vacations every summer. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Vanessa started going out more with her girlfriends once Owen started kindergarten. How she'd come home after midnight smelling like alcohol and cigarettes even though she'd never smoked before. The new wardrobe, the constant phone checking, the irritability whenever I asked about her day, but I trusted her. We'd built a life together. We had 2 kids who needed both their parents. When she snapped at me for leaving dishes in the sink or asked why I was home early from work, I told myself she was stressed, maybe going through something. I suggested couples therapy twice. She said we didn't need it, that I was overreacting. The real wake-up call came on a Thursday night in March. I'd been at a work conference in Seattle, scheduled to return Friday morning, but our presentation finished early. I caught a late flight home, landed around 11, and drove straight to our house. The lights were on. Vanessa's car was in the driveway along with a black Mercedes I didn't recognize. I walked in through the garage. Music was playing in the living room. I heard laughing, glasses clinking. I came around the corner and found Vanessa and 3 people I'd never met sitting around our coffee table. There was a bottle of vodka, an ashtray full of cigarette butts, and a small mirror with white residue on it. Vanessa looked up at me, and for a second I saw panic flash across her face. Then she smiled, this brittle fake smile, and said, "Ethan, you're home early. We were just having a few drinks." The kids were asleep upstairs. Our children were in their beds 20 feet above where my wife was doing cocaine with strangers in our living room. I didn't yell. I kept my voice level and said, "Everyone needs to leave." Now, her friends, if that's what they were, grabbed their things and hurried out. Vanessa stood there in the middle of our living room, swaying slightly, and said, "You're overreacting. We were just blowing off steam." I said, "Our kids are upstairs." She rolled her eyes. "They're asleep, Ethan. Stop being such a control freak." That word. Control freak. Because I didn't want drugs in the house where my children slept. I stayed calm. I told her we'd talk in the morning when she was sober. I went upstairs, checked on Lily and Owen, both sound asleep, thankfully, and spent the night in the guest room trying to process what I'd just seen. The next morning, Vanessa acted like nothing had happened. Made pancakes for the kids, asked about my conference, chatted about weekend plans. When I brought up the previous night after the kids left for school, she got defensive immediately. It was one time, Ethan. Everyone experiments sometimes. I said, "You had cocaine in our house with our children here." She crossed her arms. "I'm not having this conversation. You're being dramatic." That's when I realized I was dealing with something much bigger than a one-time mistake. Vanessa wasn't apologetic. She was annoyed that I'd caught her. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. I noticed she'd leave the house after the kids went to bed, say she was going to the gym or meeting a friend, and not come back until 1 or 2 in the morning. I checked our bank statements and found cash withdrawals I couldn't account for. 300 here, 500 there, always from ATMs near downtown bars. I found a second phone hidden in her car, one of those cheap prepaid ones. The messages were mostly deleted, but I saw enough. plans to meet people at clubs. References to parties and getting hooked up. One message said, usual spot, bring cash. I was married to someone I didn't know anymore, or maybe I'd never known her at all. I consulted with a divorce attorney in early April. Her name was Patricia Chen, 53 years old, 26 years specializing in family law. I laid out everything, the drugs, the late nights, the secret phone, the cash withdrawals. Patricia listened carefully and then said, Ethan, I'm going to be direct with you. In custody cases, what matters most is evidence. Your word against hers won't be enough, especially if she claims. You're lying to get the upper hand in the divorce. You need documentation. I said, what kind of documentation? She explained that in our state, I could legally record in my own home without anyone's consent. Hidden cameras were admissible in family court if they documented illegal activity or child endangerment. If she's using drugs while your children are in the house, Patricia said, and you can prove it, that changes everything. The judge will have no choice but to prioritize the children's safety. I left her office with a plan. I wasn't going to accuse Vanessa of anything. I wasn't going to confront her again and give her a reason to be more careful. I was going to document everything and build an airtight case. I bought 4 small cameras online, the kind designed for home security. I installed one in the kitchen pointing toward the living room, one in the hallway near the kids' rooms, one in our home office, and one covering the front entrance. They recorded continuously to a cloud server that only I could access. The cameras were tiny, hidden in smoke detectors and decorative items. Vanessa never noticed them. For 6 weeks I watched. I went to work, came home, played with my kids, ate dinner with my family. And late at night, after everyone was asleep, I'd review the footage from while I was gone. It was worse than I'd thought. Vanessa had people over at least twice a week. Different people each time, mostly. They'd show up around 9 or 10 at night, after the kids were in bed. They'd drink, smoke, and use drugs in our living room. Cocaine mostly, sometimes pills. On one recording, Vanessa took a small bag of powder out of her purse and divided it up onto the coffee table while laughing about how Ethan's too clueless to notice anything. The worst footage came from a night in late May. I told Vanessa I had an overnight work trip, was staying at a hotel near our facility 2 hours away. In reality, I checked into the hotel, established my presence there, and drove back home around 11. I parked down the street and monitored the cameras from my phone. Vanessa had 4 people over. The music was loud enough that I could hear it through my car windows. At one point, Owen woke up. I could see him on the hallway camera, standing at the top of the stairs in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes. He called out, "Mommy?" Vanessa didn't hear him over the music. Owen stood there for almost 2 minutes before going back to his room. 15 feet away, his mother was snorting cocaine off our coffee table. I saved everything. Every recording, every timestamp, every frame. I downloaded it all to an encrypted external drive and gave copies to Patricia. In early June, I told Vanessa I wanted a divorce. I kept it simple, said we'd grown apart, that I thought we'd be better off separating. I didn't mention the drugs. I didn't mention the recordings. I let her think this was just a standard marriage falling apart. Vanessa's response was immediate and vicious. She told me if I tried to divorce her, she'd make sure I never saw my kids again. She'd tell the court I was abusive, unstable, a danger to the children. She'd get full custody, get the house, get child support and alimony. I'd be lucky to have supervised visitation. I said, let's just try to handle this fairly. She laughed. Fair? You walked out on your family, Ethan. The court's going to crucify you. I didn't argue. I just filed the paperwork and moved out to an apartment across town. Patricia told me this was strategic. It showed I was willing to give Vanessa space, that I wasn't trying to control the situation. And it meant the cameras kept recording without me there to potentially interfere. Vanessa filed for full custody immediately, claiming I'd abandoned the family. She filed for exclusive possession of the house, full child support based on my engineering salary, and 5 years of rehabilitative alimony. Her court filings painted her as a devoted mother who'd sacrificed her career for her children, and me as a workaholic who'd suddenly decided his family was inconvenient. She had an expensive lawyer, someone her parents paid for. During our first mediation session, her attorney laid out their demands in detail. I'd get the kids every other weekend, supervised by a third party she'd approve. I'd pay 70% of my income in support payments. I'd sign over my half of the house. And I'd cover all medical and educational expenses going forward. Patricia looked at me. I nodded slightly. She told Vanessa's lawyer we'd see them in court. The custody evaluation process took 3 months. A court-appointed psychologist interviewed both of us, visited both homes, talked to the kids' teachers and pediatrician. Vanessa played her role perfectly. She was the concerned mother, worried about how the divorce was affecting Lily and Owen. She talked about bedtime routines and meal planning and educational activities. She cried about how hard it was to be a single parent while I'd checked out emotionally years ago. I stayed calm during my evaluation. I answered every question honestly. I provided documentation of my involvement in the kids' lives, school events, medical appointments, extracurriculars. I showed my apartment, the bedrooms I'd set up for Lily and Owen, the schedule I'd created to make sure they'd have stability. I didn't mention the drugs, not yet. The custody trial was scheduled for late September. As the date approached, Vanessa got more confident. She'd text me things like, "Hope you're ready to be a weekend dad, and Judge is going to love hearing about your anger issues." I never responded beyond logistics about the kids. Patricia had coached me extensively. Don't engage, don't react, stay focused on the end game. The night before the trial, I reviewed every piece of footage one more time. 6 months of recordings, dozens of incidents. I'd had Patricia work with a video forensics expert to authenticate everything, to create time-stamped clips that showed exactly what happened and when. We had dates, times, locations, clear footage of Vanessa using illegal drugs in our home while our children were present. The trial started on a Tuesday morning in late September. The courthouse was one of those old stone buildings downtown, with marble floors and wood-paneled courtrooms. Judge Rebecca Morrison was presiding, a woman in her early 60s who'd been on the family court bench for 18 years. She had a reputation for being thorough, fair, and absolutely intolerant of anything that endangered children. Vanessa's lawyer went first. She called Vanessa to the stand and walked her through a carefully prepared testimony. Vanessa described her daily routine with the kids: breakfast, school drop-off, homework help, bedtime stories. She talked about how she'd given up career advancement to be a present mother. She cried when discussing how the divorce was affecting Lily and Owen, how they asked why Daddy didn't live with them anymore. It was a compelling performance. If I hadn't seen the recordings, I might have believed it myself. Vanessa's lawyer called character witnesses. Her mother testified about what a devoted daughter and mother Vanessa was. A friend from her old book club talked about Vanessa's involvement in school fundraisers. Her former boss described her as reliable and dedicated. Then it was my turn. Patricia called me to the stand. I testified about my relationship with my kids, my work schedule, my involvement in their lives. I was honest about my long hours, but explained that I'd always prioritized family events, that I'd never missed a birthday or important occasion. Vanessa's lawyer cross-examined me aggressively. She implied I was emotionally distant, that I'd used work as an excuse to avoid family responsibilities, that my sudden interest in active parenting was just a custody ploy. I stayed calm. I answered every question directly. I didn't get defensive or angry. Then Patricia called our witnesses. Lily and Owen's teachers both testified about my involvement, how I'd volunteered for field trips, attended every parent-teacher conference, responded immediately to any concerns. The kids' soccer coach talked about how I'd never missed a game, how both Lily and Owen lit up when they saw me on the sidelines. Patricia also called my neighbors from our old street. Mrs. Brennan, who lived 2 doors down, testified about the late-night parties at our house, the unfamiliar cars in the driveway, the music loud enough to disturb the neighborhood. She'd made notes in her calendar, had dates and times. I watched Vanessa's face as Mrs. Brennan testified. She'd gone very still, her confident expression starting to crack. Then Patricia said, "Your Honor, we have one more piece of evidence to present. Video recordings from the family home." Vanessa's lawyer immediately objected. She claimed the recordings were obtained illegally, that they violated privacy, that they should be inadmissible. Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. "Counsel, please explain the origin of these recordings." Patricia explained that I had installed security cameras in my own home, that all recordings were made in common areas with no expectation of privacy, that under state law, I had every right to monitor my own property. She cited 3 previous cases where similar evidence had been admitted in family court proceedings. Judge Morrison reviewed the case citations, then said, "Objection overruled. Let's see what you have." Patricia had prepared a compilation. 20 minutes of footage, carefully edited to show the most relevant incidents. She'd removed any portions that showed just normal activity, focused entirely on the drug use and the evidence of child endangerment. The courtroom lights dimmed. Patricia's assistant connected a laptop to the court's display system. A large screen descended from the ceiling. I glanced at Vanessa. She was staring at the screen, her face pale. Her lawyer was whispering urgently in her ear. The video started. The first clip showed Vanessa and 3 people in our living room. The time stamp read 10:47 p.m. on a Friday in April. They were sitting around the coffee table. One of the men pulled out a small bag of white powder. Vanessa was laughing, saying something inaudible. Then she leaned forward, and the camera clearly showed her snorting a line of cocaine. The next clip was from a week later. Different people, same activity. This time the audio was clearer. Someone said, "Where are your kids?" Vanessa's voice responded, "Asleep upstairs. Don't worry, they never wake up." The compilation continued, clip after clip, week after week. Vanessa using drugs in our home, different people every time. Always at night, always while our children were upstairs. Then came the worst clip. The night Owen woke up and stood at the top of the stairs calling for his mother. The footage showed him clearly, a 5-year-old boy in pajamas, confused and scared, while 15 feet below him his mother was too intoxicated to hear him. The courtroom was completely silent. The video ended. The lights came back up. I looked at Judge Morrison. Her expression was ice-cold fury. Vanessa's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess to consult with my client." Judge Morrison said, "Request denied. Ms. Reeves, do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" Vanessa was crying, not the calculated tears from her earlier testimony. Real, panicked crying. Her lawyer tried to speak, but Vanessa just kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Judge Morrison let her cry for exactly 10 seconds. Then she said, "Ms. Reeves, are you denying that the person in these videos is you?" Vanessa shook her head. "Are you denying that these incidents took place while your minor children were present in the home?" Another head shake. "Are you denying that you were using illegal narcotics?" Vanessa whispered, "No, Your Honor." Judge Morrison closed the folder in front of her. "I've seen enough. We'll take a brief recess while I prepare my ruling, but I want to be clear. This court takes child endangerment extremely seriously. Using illegal drugs while responsible for the care of minors is unconscionable. Doing so repeatedly in the children's home demonstrates a fundamental failure of parental judgment and responsibility." We reconvened 45 minutes later. Judge Morrison delivered her ruling from the bench, full physical custody to me. Vanessa would have supervised visitation only, twice a week for 2 hours at a time, at a court-approved facility with a paid supervisor present. She was ordered to undergo drug testing weekly and to complete a substance abuse treatment program. Until she could demonstrate 6 months of sobriety, her custody status would not be reconsidered. The house would be sold, with proceeds split 50-50 after the mortgage was paid. Vanessa would receive no alimony. Child support would be calculated based on the standard formula, which given her part-time income meant she'd pay me $200 a month. Judge Morrison looked directly at Vanessa and said, "Ms. Reeves, you put your children at risk repeatedly. You demonstrated appalling judgment and a complete disregard for their safety and well-being. This court's primary obligation is to protect minor children. I'm hopeful that supervised visitation and treatment will allow you to eventually rebuild a relationship with your children, but that will depend entirely on your willingness to address your substance abuse issues." Vanessa was sobbing. Her lawyer had her arm around her shoulders. Her parents, who'd been sitting in the gallery, looked devastated. I felt no triumph, just relief. My kids would be safe. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Vanessa's parents paid her share of the mortgage to buy out my equity. So I ended up with about $60,000 from the house sale. I used it as a down payment on a better apartment, one with 3 bedrooms and a backyard, in the same school district so Lily and Owen could stay at their schools. Vanessa attended her supervised visits sporadically at first. Lily told me once that Mommy had been crying the whole time, kept apologizing, said she was sick but was getting better. Owen, who was younger, seemed less affected. He was just happy to see her. Over time, Vanessa did get better. She completed an inpatient treatment program, then outpatient therapy. She started passing her weekly drug tests. After 8 months, she petitioned the court for expanded visitation. Judge Morrison granted unsupervised day visits, 4 hours twice a week. Vanessa has never asked for the custody arrangement to be modified beyond that. I think she knows what would happen if she tried. She knows I have documentation of everything, that Judge Morrison's opinion of her parenting hasn't changed. The kids are doing well. Lily is 11 now, Owen is 8. They see their mother regularly, and I've never said a negative word about her in front of them. Whatever mistakes Vanessa made, she's still their mother. They have a right to a relationship with her as long as they're safe. As for me, I'm still working at the same firm, still living in the same apartment. I started dating someone last year, a woman named Rachel who teaches 5th grade at Lily's school. We're taking it slow, making sure the kids are comfortable with everything. Sometimes people ask me how I stayed so calm during the divorce, how I managed to document everything without exploding at Vanessa or confronting her. The truth is, I was terrified. Terrified that if I tipped my hand too early, she'd get more careful. Terrified that without concrete proof, the court would side with her. Terrified that my kids would end up in a dangerous situation. But I also knew that anger and confrontation wouldn't protect my children. Evidence would. Strategy would. Patience would. I think about that night I came home early from Seattle, walked into my living room and saw strangers doing drugs at my coffee table. I could have called the police right then. Part of me wanted to, but Patricia was right. One incident might not have been enough. Vanessa could have claimed it was an isolated mistake, that she'd been going through a rough time, that she'd never do it again. Instead, I documented a pattern. 6 months of repeated behavior that proved this wasn't an isolated incident. It was who Vanessa had become. The hardest part was living in that apartment across town, watching the camera feeds on my phone, knowing what was happening in my house while I couldn't be there. Seeing my kids on the hallway camera, watching them get ready for school, knowing their mother was probably hungover in the bedroom. But I had to let it play out. I had to give Vanessa enough rope to hang herself, legally speaking. Judge Morrison told me after the trial was over, while we were in her chambers finalizing some paperwork, that the video evidence was the most comprehensive documentation of parental unfitness she'd seen in her 18 years on the bench. She said most custody cases come down to he said, she said arguments, conflicting testimony, character witnesses contradicting each other. But video evidence doesn't lie. She also said that if I hadn't documented everything, given Vanessa's polished testimony and character witnesses, the custody arrangement would likely have been 50-50. Maybe even tilted in Vanessa's favor, since she'd been the primary caregiver during the day while I worked. That thought still haunts me sometimes. The idea that without those cameras, my kids might have been living primarily with someone who was regularly using drugs in their home. The idea that the system might have failed them because I didn't have proof. Talked to other fathers going through custody battles since then. The advice I give is always the same. Document everything. If your ex is doing something that endangers your kids, you need evidence. Contemporaneous notes, photographs, recordings if they're legal in your state. Character witnesses who can testify to what they've seen. The family court system is supposed to prioritize children's best interests, but it's still a legal system. It runs on evidence and testimony and established facts. If you go in with just your word against your ex's word, you're rolling the dice. I got lucky. I had the resources to hire an excellent attorney, the technical ability to install cameras and manage the recordings, the patience to wait and document rather than confronting Vanessa immediately. Not everyone has those advantages, but even if you can't afford cameras or expensive lawyers, you can document. You can take notes with dates and times. You can save text messages and emails. You can talk to teachers and doctors and coaches, people who see how your kids are doing and can testify to your involvement. The other thing I learned is that judges can see through performances. Vanessa had clearly been coached by her lawyer, had rehearsed her testimony, had arranged for character witnesses who would support her narrative. And it was convincing, until the video evidence contradicted everything she'd claimed. Judge Morrison wasn't fooled by the tears or the devoted mother routine once she saw what Vanessa was actually doing when she thought no one was watching. Family court judges have seen it all. They know what manipulation looks like. They know the difference between a parent who's genuinely focused on their children's well-being and a parent who's trying to win a legal battle. Vanessa could have avoided all of this. If she'd just been honest after that first night I caught her, if she'd agreed to get help, to do couples counseling, to address whatever was driving her to use drugs, we might have found a way through it. Not stayed married probably, but found a way to co-parent safely. Instead, she chose to escalate. to threaten me with false abuse allegations, to claim she'd destroy my relationship with my kids, to demand everything in the divorce while painting me as the villain. She gambled that I wouldn't be able to prove anything. She lost. I don't hate Vanessa. I don't think she's evil. I think she has serious problems with addiction, and I hope she continues working on those issues. For her own sake and for our kids' sake. But I also don't regret what I did. Every decision I made, installing the cameras, documenting everything, working with Patricia to build an airtight case, was about protecting Lily and Owen. Everything else was secondary. The kids ask me sometimes why they don't live with both parents like some of their friends do. I keep my answers age-appropriate. I tell them that sometimes adults have problems they need to work on, and that it's safer for them to live with me right now. I tell them their mom loves them very much and is working hard to be the parent they deserve. Lily is old enough to have figured out some of what happened. She hasn't asked directly, but I see her watching Vanessa during their visits, paying attention in a way kids don't unless they're worried about something. When she's older, if she asks me directly, I'll tell her the truth. Not to turn her against her mother, but because she deserves to know. Owen is still young enough that he just accepts the arrangement. Dad's house during the week, Mom's house for visits on the weekend. That's just how things are. Rachel asked me once if I ever wondered what would have happened if I hadn't come home early that night in March. If I'd completed the conference, flown home the next morning, never walked in on Vanessa and her friends, the answer is yes. I think about it all the time. How long would it have continued? Would Vanessa have eventually overdosed? Would something have happened to the kids while she was too intoxicated to hear them? Would one of the strangers she brought into our home have been dangerous? I don't have answers to those questions. But I know that walking in that night, seeing what I saw, forced me to make a choice. I could pretend everything was fine, hope Vanessa would stop on her own, try to manage the situation through conversations and ultimatums. Or I could face reality and do whatever was necessary to protect my children. I chose protection. I chose documentation over confrontation. I chose a long-game strategy over immediate satisfaction. And when I sat in that courtroom watching Judge Morrison's face as she reviewed the video evidence, watching Vanessa's confident facade crumble, watching her lawyer scramble for any defense that might work, I knew I'd made the right choice. The moment that stands out most vividly isn't the judge's ruling or Vanessa's breakdown. It's earlier in the compilation, that clip of Owen standing at the top of the stairs in his dinosaur pajamas, calling for his mother while she was too intoxicated to hear him. When that footage played, I heard someone in the courtroom gallery gasp. I turned and saw one of the court staff, a woman in her 50s, with her hand over her mouth and tears in her eyes. She was looking at that little boy on the screen, and I realized she was seeing what I'd seen when I first watched that recording. Not a custody dispute or a legal argument or competing testimonies about who was the better parent. Just a 5-year-old child who needed his mother, and she wasn't there for him because she'd made a choice to get high instead. That's what this whole case came down to. Not my rights or Vanessa's rights or who deserved what in the divorce. It came down to 2 kids who needed at least one parent capable of putting their safety first. I think Vanessa understands that now, after everything. The supervised visits, the treatment program, the weekly drug tests, they forced her to confront what she'd become. Whether she can maintain sobriety long-term, I don't know. I hope so. But that's not my responsibility anymore. My responsibility is making sure Lily and Owen grow up in a stable, safe environment. Making sure they do their homework and eat vegetables and get to soccer practice on time. Making sure they know they're loved and valued and that their home is a place where they don't have to worry about what they might find when they wake up in the middle of the night. That's what I fight for every day. Not revenge against Vanessa or validation that I was right. Just the simple, profound responsibility of being a parent who shows up. The cameras are still installed in my apartment, actually. Not because I think Vanessa would try anything. She knows better now. But because after everything that happened, I like having that documentation. If Owen falls off his bike, it's on camera. If Lily has friends over and someone's parent later claims something inappropriate happened, I have footage proving otherwise. If anyone ever questions my parenting or my home environment, I have evidence. Maybe that sounds paranoid. Maybe it is. But I learned the hard way that your word alone isn't enough in family court. Evidence is everything. Patricia told me during our last meeting, after the divorce was finalized, that I'd done everything exactly right. She said most of her clients either confront too early and give the other parent time to hide their behavior, or they wait too long and the judge questions why they didn't act sooner to protect the children. I documented for exactly the right amount of time. 6 months was enough to establish a pattern, prove this wasn't isolated incidents, show that Vanessa had no intention of stopping on her own. But it wasn't so long that Judge Morrison could question why I'd left the kids in that situation if I knew it was happening. That calculation. How long to wait, how much evidence to gather was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. Every night I spent in that apartment watching the camera feeds, knowing what was happening in my house, I questioned whether I should just go get the kids right then. But Patricia kept reminding me, one incident isn't enough. You need pattern and practice. You need evidence that can't be explained away or dismissed as a one-time mistake made during a difficult period. So I waited. I documented. I built an airtight case. And when the time came, I had everything I needed to protect my children. The financial situation worked out better than I expected, actually. After the house sold, and I received my portion of the equity after paying off some credit card debt I'd accumulated during the separation, I had enough left for a solid down payment on a place with a real yard. Not as nice as the house Vanessa and I had bought together, but good enough. Safe neighborhood, decent schools, parks nearby. My salary covers everything comfortably. The $200 a month Vanessa pays in child support barely covers groceries for a week, but I don't need her money. I needed the court to acknowledge that she was the one who'd failed as a parent, not me. The money was symbolic, Judge Morrison's way of saying that despite Vanessa's claims about being the devoted primary caregiver, the evidence showed otherwise. Work has been understanding through everything. My manager knew I was going through a difficult divorce, gave me flexibility for court dates and attorney meetings. After the custody ruling, he pulled me aside and said he'd noticed my performance hadn't suffered despite everything going on in my personal life. And that kind of professionalism was why I was up for promotion to senior engineer. I got that promotion 3 months later. The raise helped offset the increased costs of being a single parent. After-school programs, a cleaning service because I don't have time to keep up with everything. The higher rent on the 3-bedroom apartment. Rachel came into my life about 18 months after the divorce finalized. Lily had mentioned her teacher, Ms. Anderson, several times, talked about how nice she was, how she made math fun. I met Rachel at a parent-teacher conference and there was immediate chemistry, but I was careful, very careful. I wasn't going to introduce anyone to my kids unless I was certain the relationship had long-term potential. Lily and Owen had been through enough disruption. They didn't need to meet a parade of women who might not stick around. Rachel and I dated for 6 months before she met the kids, and even then it was casual, running into each other by accident at a park, getting ice cream together, no big announcement that Dad had a girlfriend. We let Lily and Owen get comfortable with her presence gradually. They like her. Owen especially. Rachel has infinite patience for his endless questions about dinosaurs and space and why things work the way they do. Lily is more reserved, but she's warming up. Last month she asked if Rachel could teach her how to braid hair like the style Rachel wears sometimes. Those small moments of normalcy. Homework at the kitchen table, soccer games on Saturday mornings, dinner together as a family. Those are what I fought for. Not revenge against Vanessa. Not to win some legal battle. Just the simple right to give my kids a stable, safe childhood. Vanessa has met Rachel a few times during custody exchanges. She's polite but distant. I think it hurts her to see someone else involved in the kids' daily lives, occupying a space she used to fill. But that's a consequence of her choices, not something I owe her an apology for. The kids still see Vanessa twice a week, usually Saturday and Wednesday afternoons. She picks them up at my apartment, takes them to her place or out for activities, brings them back 4 hours later. She's been sober for almost 2 years now, according to her test results. The court reduced the testing frequency to monthly after she hit the 1-year mark. She's never asked to modify the custody arrangement beyond what she is now. I think she knows that 4 hours twice a week is generous given what Judge Morrison saw on those recordings. I think she also knows that if she pushes for more and I object, we'll end up back in court, and I still have all that evidence archived. We're civil with each other. We communicate about the kids' schedules, medical appointments, school events. It's not friendly, but it's functional. That's all it needs to be. Lily asked me last month why I'm not angry at Mommy. We were driving home from her soccer game, stuck in traffic, and she just asked out of nowhere. I thought carefully about how to answer. Finally, I said, "Being angry takes a lot of energy, sweetie. I'd rather spend that energy making sure you and your brother have a good life." She thought about that for a moment, then said, "That makes sense." Kids are perceptive. Lily knows something serious happened between her mother and me. She knows it's not normal for parents to only have limited visitation with their kids. But she also sees that I'm not bitter, that I don't say mean things about Vanessa, that I encourage their relationship with her. I hope that's enough. I hope that as they get older, they'll understand that everything I did was to protect them, not to punish their mother. The truth is, I don't think about Vanessa much anymore. She's the mother of my children, will be connected for the rest of our lives through Lily and Owen, but she's not a central figure in my life anymore. She's someone I co-parent with, someone I coordinate schedules with, and that's it. The anger I felt during those 6 months of documentation, watching her endanger our children night after night, that's gone. It had to go. You can't carry that kind of rage around and still be a good parent. It would have poisoned everything. Instead, I focused on what I could control, creating a stable home, being present for my kids, building a new life that had nothing to do with what Vanessa had destroyed. And it worked. My life now is better than my life was during those final years of marriage when I was lying to myself about how bad things had gotten. Better than those first months after I moved out when I'd watch the camera feeds every night and feel my stomach turn. I have my kids full time. I have work I'm good at and a promotion I earned. I have Rachel, who's patient and kind and great with Lily and Owen. I have stability and peace and a home that's actually safe. That's what I fought for. That's what those 6 months of strategic patience and careful documentation won for me. Was it worth it? Every sleepless night reviewing footage, every moment of restraint when I wanted to confront Vanessa, every dollar spent on Patricia's legal fees, every minute in that courtroom watching Vanessa try to paint herself as Mother of the Year. I look at my kids now, Lily doing her homework at the kitchen table while Owen builds some elaborate Lego creation on the living room floor, both of them safe and happy and thriving. And the answer is obvious. It was worth every second. Because at the end of the day, that's what being a parent means, not the fun parts or the easy parts. It means making hard choices and playing the long game and doing whatever necessary to protect your children, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable or requires more patience than you think you have. It means installing cameras in your own home and documenting your wife's drug use for 6 months instead of confronting her immediately. It means sitting in courtroom and watching footage that breaks your heart because it's the only way to prove what you know is true. It means staying calm and strategic when every instinct tells you to react with anger. It means winning the war, not just the battle, and I won. My kids are safe. That's all that matters. Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or you know someone who has, hit that subscribe button. We share real stories from real people every single day. Stories about betrayal and strategy and justice served. Stories about people who refused to be victims and fought smart for what mattered most. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you ever had to document evidence for a custody battle? What advice would you give to someone going through what I went through? And remember, when it comes to protecting your children, there's no such thing as being too prepared. Document everything. Trust evidence, not promises. And never, ever underestimate the power of playing the long game. Thanks for listening to my story. I'm Ethan, and this was the story of how I got my kids back.